Alright, so we're back working on the motorcycle again now, finally, here. This will probably all be in the same video, but it's been a week or so, a couple weeks here, I think, maybe, since I've worked on it. I've been kind of pretty busy right now, but figured I'd work on this again, so just show you what I got here. Alright, so basically it's where I kind of left off last. I got all the boots pushed in for the air filter, so I should be able to get enough clearance now to get the carburetors out, because these all come out as an assembly. So you got to loosen all these boots. Make sure you get a good fitting. If you guys have the original clamps and whatnot on them, make sure you get a good fitting Phillips screwdriver and press in tightly. Otherwise, I know a couple of these, the Phillips heads are actually a little bit gummed up, so they loved Phillips on these things, so you kind of got to watch it. So yeah, I'm gonna get these popped off and they should slide out. I already got the choke cable and the throttle cable disconnected off camera, so not too bad. So what usually works on is you straddle the bike like you would be riding it, and you just, with all these, everything loose, kind of grab on, and sometimes you gotta work on one side first like that and pop them out. And I think the first one I ever did was on a Suzuki, and those actually had to come out one way or the other. There, just like that. And you got all your clamps and boots. These you want to make sure aren't all cracked, because if you get a vacuum leak, it'll run really weird, obviously. So, yeah. So now I'm going to take and go through and check out this thing. Already looks like one of the carburetor clearly been taken apart before, because one of them is out of sync with the rest, it looks like, so we'll have to tweak that a little bit. Alright, so I believe this goes for just about all motorcycle carburetors, but they'll have these little slide tubes, and these are actually what kind of controls does a lot of your fueling. They kind of act like little mini fuel pumps for each cylinder, but you want to make sure they all move. Let's see. Screwdriver. Move freely and back, and that's the first thing to check. Those all move, so that's good. That means nothing's stuck up there. A little bit of corrosion here, that's not a big deal. The other kind of external check you can do is, if you look, this one, see, nice and tight, nice and tight, nice and tight, and then there's a gap. And if you look, you can actually see there's that screw with the spring on it. That's the adjustment for this carburetor. That's the adjustment for that carburetor. That's the adjustment for this carburetor. And then this one here is your, I guess, primary carburetor, you want to call it, I guess, maybe. This is the one that is the main adjustment. So got to take and adjust that a little bit, and I'm going to take and pull this shield off the bottom here and clean the floats out, because there was some brown stuff came out when I dumped this thing over. So yeah, actually this carburetor is the main carburetor that everything is adjusted off of. This is your throttle linkage here, and then there's this ear and that ear. So this one is separate, and this one is separate from this one. So this is the main one. So this is the first one you would adjust, and then you can adjust this one, and then this one, and then this one. That'd be how you'd adjust these, and that's called, they call it syncing. You actually, the official way to do it, after you can kind of bench sync them and get them close, but on the boots where these attach to, there is a little nipple for attaching vacuum line. They actually make, it's a 4-gauge set, and it's vacuum gauge, and then you adjust the 4 cylinders off of vacuum, with these screws. Alright, so got that little bottom shield off. That was just a whole bunch of these big Phillips screws. This is actually, this screw will poke through kind of like this on the carburetor. This is actually how you adjust your idle speed once you get the carburetor synced. So that's kind of how you adjust that, because that'll take and work on the bottom, this little bottom ear of the throttle linkage. So just gotta take and pop these little screws out and pop these float bowls off. One thing to note when you're working on something like this where you got 4 different carburetors, keep the parts that came out of that carburetor in that carburetor. Most of these things are gonna be kind of, I think this bike's has got 15 or 20,000 miles, somewhere in that ballpark on it. So everything's been worn together. Usually these things should have a number on them somewhere. I haven't really looked yet. I'm not too worried. I don't plan on taking them off the rail unless I have to. So I'm gonna get these float bowls popped off then. Alright, there's all the floats or the bowls off. One thing you can look, let's see if I can get an angle on here where you can see. If you look in there, you can there. You can see the needle actually moving. So that's a good sign. Want to make sure those all move. Because if they don't, if they're stuck shut, you won't get fuel in that carburetor. If they're stuck open, well then you continually flood that one carburetor. One cylinder will stay flooded. We're going to pull these jets out. There's the main jet. This is the one that works off that little slide. There's a needle on the bottom of the slide that pokes in this way, and so as you increase your RPM, it pulls that slide open more with vacuum and causes it to suck more fuel through this jet. I believe this one should be the idle jet, the little one there. And then, yeah, these fuel bowls this one's not too bad, but like this one has got some nastiness going on. So I'm gonna clean out those fuel bowls, clean these jets. These are brass, so you want to make sure you have a very good fitting screwdriver and are kind of patient with them. Don't want to end up chewing those up. So yeah. Alright, so got these kind of cleaned up. I was starting to kind of wonder, besides just the dirty float bowl, why I bothered to take the jets out, and then I ran across the idle jet for that carburetor. This one here, which coming off the bike, I think that would be, it's either number 2 or number 3. Yeah, that one's stopped up cold, so you got sitting in some mineral spirit, see if it'll dissolve some of the gunk that's blocking it up, and then we're gonna go ahead and throw these other 3 carburetors back together, and then we'll check out the top end, which would be the little diaphragm, make sure those all look good. Alright, so here's kind of what it looks like underneath the little top hat, I guess you want to call it. This is just the cover. And these ones look like there's not really a right or a wrong way to put them on. They're pretty much symmetrical all the way around. But then underneath that, you'll find this spring, and then there's your diaphragm assembly, which will look like this, which has got your main jet needle, that barrel that you can see when you look in the intake side of the carburetor, and then this rubber diaphragm gasket. And the 2 that I've got off look pretty good, so I don't think I got this screw right here and that screw are giving me problems, so I don't think I'm gonna fight with them. So I'll put this back together, and if I have problems with it, then I'll have to take them apart. But for now, it looks good. And there's one little jet underneath here, and I pulled this one out and it looks perfect, so I'm not going to be too worried about these other ones. Alright, so I got the carburetors all back together here. Got this cover back on, and forgot that this wheel, while it does have some adjustment on your idle speed, is also the adjustment for adjusting this throttle plate on this main carburetor. So just a heads up there. So I got them all kind of opened up here. Like this one's a little bit tighter on the bottom gap. What you're looking at is this gap at the bottom of the carburetor, whereas these 3 are actually really pretty close. So this one, I'm going to tweak it a little bit. There's I have to see if I can find it, but I might have something that'll work. But you can use like a guitar string, like a high E guitar string. Then you gotta be careful not to put a groove in the carburetor body or in the fin, but you can actually use that to get them all set so they're about the same as a good baseline. But I'll take and grab a screwdriver here and take and try to show you here how these work. So as I close this more, it's opening that blade more. So what I do is try to get this, I'm just going to eyeball it for now, but kind of get it so it looks fairly close and similar to the other ones. But that's kind of the gist of that. These screws on top are part of the reason why when guys are working on these older Japanese bikes, they have a tendency to just replace most of the hardware with Allen head, because, well, stuff like that starts to happen because these screws are kind of soft. But yeah. Alright, so here's the fuel petcock out of the tank. This is the vacuum line. This actually connects to one of the carburetor boots on the engine side, between the carburetors and the engine. And here's the petcock itself. It's got oblong or oval O-ring on it. Your switch selector valves, you got reserve, on, and then prime. And then on this side you got, this is your fuel to the carburetors, and this is your vacuum feed. Pull these 4 Phillips screws out and take a look at the diaphragm for the vacuum in there. And then it looks like this fuel feed comes off. Just want to make sure it should be a diaphragm in here, and hopefully it's not torn, because we'll have to see if it is. I'll have to see if I can get a new one or a new aftermarket or rebuilt petcock, so we'll see. Well, there's the fuel petcock all broken down. So you got the main body, so this is the vacuum side. There's where your fuel goes out in the bottom here. And then this is where the switch would be. So then inside there is this little rubber washer with 4 holes in it. Only 2 of which are used. So you can actually technically, I guess, rotate it to get if it's starting to not seal in one spot, you can rotate it, I guess. I don't know. It's what makes sense to me, I guess. And there's the inside of the valve. There's a rubber O-ring there. A spring clip that sits on top of that. And then here's your plate that shows your different positions. The fuel feed outlet. Your diaphragm assembly for the vacuum side. And it seems to be, I gotta look at this side a little better, but it seems to be in decent shape. Your spring, and then the actual vacuum plate itself. So I'm going to take and look over everything really good here, clean things up a little bit, and put it back together. Well, I got the fuel petcock back in the tank for now. I might order a new O-ring for it. Now, there's some old gas in the tank I haven't have to drain out yet. It seems like it's probably sealing, but we'll see. I'll have to keep an eye on it. I shoved the carburetors back on. I did not tighten down the clamps yet. I'm kind of toying with the idea of replacing the screws on them, because they're all the Phillips heads in these clamps are about half stripped out, so we're kind of a pain to get off. So I might just go get some new screws for those. This right here, that's that vacuum feed for the fuel petcock. In this case, this is a fuel line for the carburetors. That's the fuel feed. So not very many connections, which is nice about them doing these in these bank like this, but we're slowly but surely getting closer to being able to fire this thing up and see how it runs. So that's one point I wanted to bring up. On this bike, the mufflers here have been cut off on both sides, which is fine and all. But one thing you got to understand with a motorcycle engine is it's a small engine. You change airflow in any sort of way, it's going to mess with your fueling. So usually a lot of these Japanese bikes, especially from that 70s and 80s and probably even further in that era, tend to run lean from the factory to both get their efficiency, but also to meet some emission stuff. So you got to watch how much you go, because I know guys will like to take and cut their mufflers off like this. They'll replace the stock air box with pods, partially because it makes it a heck of a lot easier to get the carburetors off if you need to, and partially because it, you know, if it was a big end, it does allow more airflow, so, you know, more power. But you got to watch your fueling. And so when you start doing stuff like that, you end up having to run into having to rejet, try to not to burn up your motor. So that's just one thing I wanted to bring up. I'll probably keep the stock airbox on there just for the sake of keeping it on there. Not having to mess with the jetting any more than it may need to get messed with. I don't think I'm going to change jets. I'm going to see how it runs, but I just wanted to bring that point up so everyone's in the know. Alright, so as you just saw there, bike does run now, but couldn't tell. It's a 4-cylinder bike and it didn't quite sound like it was running all four. It, you know, still sounds like it runs halfway decent. And what you can do, you gotta be careful, is you can take and feel the exhaust pipes and kind of tell if a cylinder is either running a little bit light or not running as well. And number 4 is not firing at all. Number 1 and 2 were hot almost right away. They were firing right away. But number 4 and number 3 was a little slow, but it started picking up, so I don't know what's up with that. But I pulled the plug out on number 4, and it's getting fuel, if it'll focus here. It's getting fuel. And the one good thing is that the bike definitely was not running lean. But, so it's okay, whatever. And let's see if I can do this with one hand. Shove the plug in there. You can set it off on something metal there. And I already checked the gap. It's like a 27 thousandths gap. But when I power on, I got all the other plug wires disconnected here. Let's see if I can get a stable. There you go. No spark. Okay, so then I take the plug from number 1 here, which is a good cylinder I know is running. So, okay, is it a bad wire or is it a plug? Now, honestly, I don't think I've ever had a bad plug before. But right here, there we go, spark. So the plug's bad. So I guess I'll have to get a plug. I'm going to check number 3 just to see if that plug is behaving or not. I guess one thing I do here is I'll show you how I know it's bad. The plug is bad and it's not something just quirk with the cylinders. I'll take and put it in number 1, which works. There's that. Power still on. Oh, a little bit of spark. Hold on. I saw a little spark there, so maybe I can... Oh, maybe it's just carboned up real bad and it needs some good cleaning. I guess I might try cleaning it first and see what I can do, but... Yeah, that was interesting. Well, there we go. It leaks a little gas a little bit, but it runs. I was able to get spark out of that one plug, but I'm kind of suspicious of it possibly having a cracked insulator or a cracking insulator or something, because it's here and there arcing across from the electrode to the thread body, not the actual ground strap. So I'm kind of thinking there might be a little bit of an issue there, but for there, you know, it sounded a little better after cleaning that plug out real good, so it at least helped. But yeah, I'm thinking it's this carburetor right here actually too, because you can kind of, I don't know if you guys can see, but it looks like it gets wet up in here, like either the float set a little high, or well, I know the gaskets are all used, they're old gaskets, so that's probably part of it. But I think that float's probably not set quite right. But I don't know, for kind of a tinker bike, it's not bad. So yeah, so there's that project. It runs again. I mean, I'm kind of tempted to try taking it to work one day, but we'll see. I might not, because I mean, technically it's not licensed, and I'm not licensed to ride it, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing with this thing yet. We'll see. I might part it out, or I might just sell it as a whole, see what I can get for it. But thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and hit like. And so thanks for watching.